We're joined on a monthly basis by U.S. Representative Raul Labrador, who serves the 1st District of Idaho in Washington. We take a few minutes to talk about some legislative issues and other big issues taking place in the nation's capital. He's with us this morning. It's 8:17. Bill Cowley with you as well on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. And we're at 48. And Representative, first of all, welcome back to our program.
It's great to be on your show.
This bill has passed the House, which you helped put together, that will combat criminal gang violence, especially that gang violence we may see from MS-13 and some of these other foreign gangs. And I guess now this thing is on its way to the Senate, where it would be expected to pass, right?
It should pass, but as you know, the Senate is sometimes the place where all good ideas go to die. So we're hoping that the Senate can get its act together. It's actually passed by a bipartisan vote in the House. We had 11 Democrats joining all but one Republican to pass this bill. So we're hoping that we can get sufficient Republicans and Democrats in the Senate to vote for this. According to ICE, violent transnational gangs have grown to become a serious threat in American communities across the nation. And these gangs are exploiting some loopholes that we have in our immigration laws. Right now, a gang member has to have committed a specific crime before they can be deported out of the United States, even if we have evidence that they belong to a transnational gang, that they belong to a violent gang. So what this bill does is it allows ICE to put somebody in custody who belongs to some of these gangs like MS-13 and others.
There are a lot of people who I don't think realize that these gangs are operating in, I think it's all 50 states now. I was at the cell phone store over by the Magic Valley Mall in Twin Falls, and I was talking to a man who relocated here from Nampa and said he wanted to get out of Nampa because the activity there has gotten quite serious. So it is here in Idaho as well. It's not just happening in Southern California or Long Island.
Well, in Idaho, we even have a gang task force where the local prosecutors and the U.S. Attorney's Office work together to fight gang activity, and they're fighting these gang members and they're doing a good job of prosecuting the crimes. But one of the problems that we had with immigration laws, when you had somebody here who was either illegally or here with just legal permanent residence, and they become members of these violent gangs, we have to wait until they actually commit a violent crime before we can even institute any kind of removal proceedings against them. And if you're here illegally or on legal permanent residence, you shouldn't be allowed to stay in the United States if you're going to belong to a violent gang. So what my bill does is it ensures that criminal alien gang members are not eligible for immigration benefits, such as asylum, special immigrant juvenile status, or temporary protected status, and it permits to place alien gang members into removal proceedings on the grounds of being criminal gang members.
In other words, their association is what's going to, I don't want to say convict them, but could lead to their deportation.
It could lead. And the government has, to be clear, the government has to prove that they are members of a violent gang. It can't just be just a group of kids that are hanging out together. You know what I'm saying? It has to be, there has to be evidence that the gang that they're affiliated with is a proven violent gang that is, threatening our society. So just because 5 kids are standing around and hanging out and doing things together, that does not make them a violent gang.
Now, assuming it gets through the Senate, I also am going to assume the president will sign it because he's been quite vocal about the same issue. Do you have a good feeling about that?
Oh, that I know that he will do because he's the one. So this bill is the third bill that came out of my larger Davis-Oliver Act. You and I have talked about that in the past. And we have not passed the full Davis-Oliver Act, but this is the third time that a bill coming out of that Davis-Oliver Act has passed the House of Representatives. These are all bills that the president has asked for and that he's eager to sign. So in his ongoing efforts to curtail illegal immigration and to make America safe, these are bills that he really wants to see on his desk, and we're working closely with the president on that.
Wanted to mention our guest is Raul Labrador, U.S. Representative from Northern Idaho. We're coming up on 822. We're at 50 on Top Story with Bill Colley on News Radio 1310, KLIX and News Radio 1310.com. I was sharing with you on the telephone before we went on air that there was some discussion on this program yesterday. Uh, it had come up a few weeks ago about, I guess it's called, is it CDB? Is that the oil that is used?
CBD, yes.
And there's been some discussion in Idaho. The bill may come up again, and it may be passed to help. It's a medical use for a marijuana extract, and the question came up, and somebody was asking what your position was, whether you just supported the creation of a law that would allow the oil, or are you looking for additional medical marijuana products?
So at this point, I only support the oil and other extracts of marijuana. I do not support fully. I do not support medical marijuana or the use of marijuana for recreational purposes. There has been no scientific data yet that tells me that medical marijuana should be used instead of some other compound that has been approved by the agencies. Now, I'm open to study, and I think the government, I have supported in the past, the government doing more studies on the use of medical marijuana. But until I see a study that clearly determines that the use of medical marijuana is necessary for certain use, I will not support it. So I distinguish between the oil and the extract and the actual, marijuana cigarette that some people use for medicinal purposes. And at this point, I'm not supportive of the latter, although I'm supportive of the former.
I'm glad you clarified that because I think you just essentially won me a bet.
Okay. Well, good. Good. I hope you enjoy it.
We're at 824. We have just a couple of minutes left, and I don't mean to throw you a curveball here, but this morning I was getting my breakfast ready, and I was watching Fox News, and the woman who does the morning weather is a woman named Janice Dean. Now I know she's originally from Canada, so she might not be straight on this, but she was mentioning the hurricane passing over Puerto Rico, and she referred to it as that nation, and I immediately thought of you, and the fact that the people there who are suffering are American citizens, and we can't lose sight of the fact that this is pummeling a part of this country.
Thank you very much. Yeah, there's 3.5 million American citizens who live on the island of Puerto Rico. As most people know, Puerto Rico is a territory of the United States. That's where I was born. I was born a U.S. citizen. Some people get confused with that, but my thoughts and prayers this morning are with the people of Puerto Rico. They have not had a direct hit by a hurricane in 85 years. So this is something that they've been experienced in a long time. Usually, for whatever reason, the hurricanes go around the island a little bit. There's plenty of tropical storms, but this is the first time that they've had a direct hit. And this morning, my thoughts and prayers are with my family and my friends who live on the island, and I hope that they're doing well. I know the governor of Puerto Rico yesterday sent out a pretty dire message telling the people to evacuate and to get to safe places, and I hope that everyone's doing well there.
I happened to see him, I think, on Neil Cavuto's program talking about this yesterday, and reiterating the fact that it's been a long, long time since anything this powerful actually hit the island. And some of the pictures I'm actually looking at live this morning from San Juan show, at least so far, no severe damage. So maybe there's a possibility we'll get out of this without a huge crisis.
I hope so. One of the things that I read this morning is that it went from Category 5 to Category 4, so that's always a good sign when they're going down in speed.
I got to tell you, I have friends who live in Hawaii, and they tell me that people come
We're
there to
ready
visit.
for it.
What's that?
Hopefully, the island's ready for it, but obviously we have to pray for the people. And in the whole Caribbean, I mean, it's been devastating.
Well, I've got to share with you, I've got friends who live in Hawaii, and they tell me that tourists come and visit, and sometimes they don't know that even Hawaii is part of the United States. So we've got to keep everyone in mind this morning in various parts of what really are the United States. And I thank you very much for your time this morning, and wish you good luck on getting the Senate to pass this bill as well.
Thank you very much. It's great to be on your show as always.
Thank you again, sir. It's Representative Raul Labrador joining us this morning on Top Story. on News Radio 1310 KLIX and News Radio 1310.com. We're at 827. Bill Colley with you too. And I do want to point out we've got the folks from Trip Family Medicine on the way in just a couple of minutes. They'll be joining us in studio. And if you've got a question or comment that is related to anything ailing you with your health, now the doctor or the physician assistant joining us this morning will have a set topic, but that doesn't preclude you from calling in if you've got another issue. You may have a cold like I have, which is rattling the discs in your back every time you cough, or is making your teeth ache because of the sinus pressure. And if you've got a question or comment, I'm sure they'll be able to handle that as well. And as I say, that's on the way in a couple of minutes. And I'm happy this morning that the representative clarified that he would be in favor if there's evidence that CDB oil is would help people with their health issues, and that would be young children with epilepsy and the like. That is not necessarily a blanket endorsement of all medical marijuana. That subject came up on the air yesterday, and I had a couple of messages from friends last night who said, "Well, if you're speaking to Mr. Labrador, can you ask him about that and get a clarification?" And I said I would do my best to do that. 828, and just a quick note, too, as well. If you're listening to the program this morning, I thank you very much for your time. I do want to point out, though, if you're struggling with hearing, you need to get in touch with Dr. Christine Pickup at Mount Harrison Audiology in Rupert. And the question may come up, well, why would I drive to Rupert if perhaps I'm coming from Twin Falls or I'm coming from Haley or Bellevue or somewhere like that? Well, commitment. Dr. Pickup and her family are honored to be part of the Mini-Cassia community, and they're proud to support local sports, the local schools, and the Independence Day celebration in Rupert every year. As a locally owned independent business, and by the way, it's the only locally owned independent hearing center in all of southern Idaho, your support allows her to in turn, to help the community. Mount Harrison Audiology is committed to serving each patient and the communities that they live in. Trust your hearing health to the only locally owned hearing healthcare practice in the Magic Valley. You can call for your appointment today, 208 312 0957. Bill Colley with you this morning on Top Story for another 90 minutes. And I do hope that you can stick around. And coming up, just quickly, I'll mention this in the next hour of the program. I hope to get some time to talk about a situation. Representative Priscilla Giddings, she's a state legislator living in Whitebird. AP story out yesterday says that she had put in for an exemption on a home she owned in Ada County while she was running for public office in her new residence. Bit of a controversy there. We'll talk about that in the next hour. I've got a couple of thoughts on that as well. If her name happened to be Mike Moyle, probably nothing would happen, but she could find herself in a problem with her fellow legislators. It's 50 right now at 8:30. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and News Radio 1310.com.